Hey everyone, welcome to Zonan Canada. I'm your host Jesse Betteridge. This is a podcast exploring the connections between anime and Canadian media. And today on the show I have a guest I have been hoping to bring on for a very long time now. She's a voice actress. You may recognize her from classic series like Ranma 1/2 and Cybersix, and also My Little Pony Friendship is Magic, and most recently World Trigger. It is Cathy Weseluck. Cathy, thank you so much for joining me today on the show.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Jesse. Thanks for the invitation.
So, out of everyone I've had on the show, I think you probably have more anime credits than anyone so far. But even then, anime is still just a very small part of your career, in Vancouver specifically, and I think it expands beyond that as well. And I was just hoping if you could just start by sharing your backstory of how you got into voiceover work, just how it's connected to other things that you've done, and just give a sense of what the scope of how you started things or where you are now.
Well, the thing is, I never expected to be a voice actor. It was not anything that I aspired to be. Mm-hmm. And it kind of came out of nowhere, and I'm so happy it did. So I was working at the time at the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation. I worked there in Toronto, and then I had a promotion which took me out to Vancouver, BC, so from the East Coast near New York State, out to the West Coast of Canada. And when I was working there, I was working as an associate producer for radio music. And a lot of people may not know, but I actually do have a Bachelor of Music and a minor in sociology. So that's my kind of background, which has nothing to do with voice acting or acting.
So you weren't actually on air at CBC Radio? You were just acting more as a producer?
I was acting more as a producer, primarily as an associate producer, but I did do stints where I was on air interviewing composers and musicians and things like that. But no, primarily I was an associate producer. Yeah, that's right. And so the host of the show, his name was Jürgen Goth, and he had a show called Disc Drive, and I was an associate producer on that show. But he said to me one day, you know, you have a really nice voice. Have you ever thought of doing voiceover? And I said, voice what? He said, commercials, narration, stuff like that. And I said, no, never thought about it. He said, well, I think you could do it. And I would be happy to help you with the demo and get you going on it. So that's kind of how that started. And, you know, I haven't looked back since. So it was quite out of the blue and quite a gift.
And this was around early 90s?
I'm not going to tell you.
Okay, all right, never mind.
It was earlier on. I'm half joking.
Yeah, okay.
It was quite some time ago, yes, and quite some time ago. And, you know, really I was a very, very young trainee producer at that time, very, very green, and you know, really, really wondering about it all, how to do what I was doing. One funny story about being an associate producer in radio music, I did start in Toronto on that program, the co-op program. And I remember being absolutely terrified because I was kind of thrown into quite a situation where I was so young and I was working amongst 30-year-olds to 60-year-olds. Mm. And the very first thing they asked me to do was set up an interview with Isaac Asimov.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and so that's a funny story, and celebrities were walking around the studio, so it was quite an interesting time for me, but that was part of the beginning.
Yeah.
Yes.
And when you made the transition into voiceover, advertising was a big part of that, I understand?
Well, advertising was a part of that in the way of me doing commercials.
All right.
So I began doing commercials before anything, and so there was a company back then, and this was a long time ago, that was a photocopy company called Bendorf Verster. That was one of the first commercials I'd ever done. So I wasn't in the production side of advertising. I was doing commercials. Mm-hmm. But I did do some casting very, very early on as well for educational training videos, commercials, and of course anime and prelay. So I had quite a busy career when I was beginning.
And what I don't know if you could even really pin it down to anything cleanly, but what sort of brought you into animation and anime work from there?
Well, it wasn't really a conscious choice, although I was kind of one of those people that walked around CBC being silly and making and I was always a little bit of the class clown, having some fun. But when you make a decision to actually do this for a living or to try your luck at it, whatever you get in the realm of voiceover is what you get. So, getting an agent, which was what I had to do, I met somebody, one of the producers at CBC said, I do know a good agent. You should consider, working with him and see what happens. So, created a demo like everybody needs to do when they're starting out. And, he sent the demo out to the appropriate places. And I started to get auditions for the gamut. So it wasn't just animation. It was commercials. It was narration. There were, video games at the time. They were they were CD-ROMs and things like that. So, but it's the entire whack. It's anything voiceover. Yeah.
And for looking at anime specifically, I know you had a lot of roles in some older things like the Humanoid and Dog Soldier and Project A-ko. I'm not sure if you have any recollections of your really early stuff or anything to share about those, but I know your first big role, or one of your most prolific early roles, was Shampoo in Ranma 1/2. And I'm just curious if you have anything to say about how getting involved in that particular series, or your reflections on that character or your performances as Shampoo.
Hi-yo, Ranma! When might take Shampoo to a date?
I would still love to do. I have a lot of recollections of that time frame because it was the first anime that we actually ever did that was of any length. Mm-hmm. And I think we did something like 170 episodes or 107. There's one.
Yeah, it's around that, yeah.
But it was really quite startling that a series like that was brand new to us, the style of production and recording. This was very, very new to us. Went so long. And before I get into Shampoo, I do recall the Humanoid and Project A-ko because I played Seiko. And Seiko was another screaming Mimi that I think followed after Ranma 1/2 or during the same time of recording. And it was just a challenge to keep my voice in that range, although I was much younger then. And so the Humanoid was also an interesting project because it was just so her performance level was so mute. And she was such a different kind of character than I had performed before. So I do recall that standing out, in that respect. Dog Soldier, I don't have too much recollection of, to be honest with you. If you told me and I'd look back at my own resume to see what characters I did, I would probably, it would probably click in a bit. But we did so many back then, Jesse. We did so many anime projects. And there was one, too, I'll just go as an aside, called Animated Showcase Classics. That was one of my favorite things I'd ever done. And it was a series of little animated classics that were Russian origin and hand-drawn. And
I think I've seen some of these, yeah.
Yeah. Film Roman was the company, and Gordon Hunt was our director, and it was one of the best experiences of my life on many levels. So that's something I wanted to add because it left a mark on me. For Shampoo, we just had so much fun, and the fun just kept going and going and going. So I had a chance to be a crazy warrior and really enjoyed working with all the other actors and Brad Swale, and it was a lot of fun, and it lasted and lasted and lasted. And that for me as a performer was the very, very first anime we had ever done that was a series and really took off. Yeah.
Yeah. I was going to ask if you would reprise the role of Shampoo again, if given the chance. I don't think there's any question, about whether or not you would.
Of course. And I would reprise absolutely any role. But Shampoo and, there's a few of them that are dear to my heart, and Shampoo is one of them, as well as Cybersix. So, yeah, I would, of course. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I guess let's jump into Cybersix. That's definitely one of your most iconic roles, both Cybersix and Adrian. Kind of one role, kind of two roles. A lot of nuance in that character and what you bring to that character. And it's again, a lot of subtleties to it, and it involves hitting this very narrow and androgynous kind of range. And I'm just curious to know how you found yourself in that role and what kind of challenges you found doing that character.
Well, that was early on. So in a way, it was a challenge to I think primarily hit the mark of what the client wants. And I think that's always our challenge, to be honest with you.
Yes.
I had done boy voices even back then. Some of them were more character-y than real, different levels, little chubby boys. I played male inanimate objects. So that's a whole story. But yeah, it's to do Adrian Seidelman, they were wanting a very specific range. And so we were trying to determine whether we would have another actor do a completely different voice or whether they wanted me to morph and do Adrian. And they wanted to, hopefully keep me, since it was indeed Cybersix doing that. And so it was just a matter of, again, getting into the acting of it and what would, a male teacher sound like, and not to go too far out of the character of Cybersix, because she, of course, is pretending to be him. So those were the challenges. But I think we did hit it, and I think it was close enough to fooling people that it would be a male, even though, it's not. So there's a dance that we do, but the client always has the final say. Yeah.
Yeah. And I know, obviously, Cybersix was only 13 episodes, and Canada is really the only country where it aired prominently. It was canceled pretty quickly in the States, and I don't think it got as much airtime in other countries. Yet, at conventions, I know that you appeared a lot of conventions, especially in the early 2000s. Well, actually, right up until they stopped doing conventions due to something that stopped conventions a couple years ago. I don't know what. But Cybersix was something that came up and something that fans responded to. I was going to ask if you expected that role to have as much of an impact as it did. I'm going to assume no, considering that you never really know what's going to have an impact. But I'm curious to know kind of about the aftermath of that and just what you found about the character to resonate with people as you heard a response from viewers.
Well, this is where it becomes obscure for me, because after Cybersix ended, which we were quite surprised it did, actually, because even we don't know quite what happened. And unfortunately, it was left as a hanger there for a possible 13, maybe not. And I personally hope that continues. I can still do that range, and I know Mike Dobson would be right on the money for that. So it was hard for me to know what kind of effect or impact it had after that point, like it is really with any show, unless I'm, online checking everything out or seeing, really getting into finding that out. But I didn't expect it to have quite a following after the fact, years later. And to be quite honest with you, Jesse, I really don't know how big that following is to this day. Yeah. But I do know that there are a lot more people that are really excited about the show now, and with good reason. I think it's a terrific show. I think there was so many things about it, even back in the 90s when we did it, that was a cutting edge thing for the time. The coloration, for example, the oranges, the blues, the blacks, the camera angles, the fact that it was kind of set in a European kind of setting. There was a lot of cutting edge stuff that was going on within the storyline as well as within the production. So I personally think it was a very high quality show. We did win a Leo Award for that, I think. I'm trying to remember, for animation. But anyway, I don't really have a sense of the impact of it with respect to fans as far as numbers or whatever.
It is showing up on streaming services now, so I think a lot of people, even outside of Canada, who didn't discover it before, are probably finding it now. And I think even to this day, it's a kind of work that people are discovering a lot of nuance and subtler themes in. So that's great, and I don't know if we're going to see more Cybersix ever, but I hope that keeps happening.
I do too. I would absolutely love to do it again. I just thought it was a great quality show all around, and quite interesting. And also it was a female lead, which is really unusual still to this day, which is a sad thing. But I would be right there ready to go.
Going back to your knack for voicing young boys, that's a very difficult range to master, and sometimes it seems that a lot of people can't do it, especially in anime. It seems that they often can find there's a very specific kind of range with anime boys specifically that they always have a hard time kind of adapting in English, but you do this very well, and your recent big anime role is Yuma in World Trigger.
Yes.
And which you totally nail that character and the type of tone he has to hit. And it really highlights this talent of yours. And I just was curious to know, and we've heard it before in like Chaozu, in Dragon Ball, Nier, in Death Note, and countless others, inanimate objects, as you mentioned before, which is that's a very interesting direction to have to try and capture.
One of those was a vegetable, and it was a yam. So I just thought I'd throw that in there.
I mean, you got to ruminate over that about like a young boy yam. What makes him a yam? So I'm curious to know, was there anything in particular that helped you pin down this skill, or what challenges have you faced with it, or was it just something you were kind of a fit for and fell into with a lot of casting?
Well, a combination of all of it. It wasn't something predetermined, like I'm going to be the boy voice person now. Although, to be quite honest with you, back in our early days when animation really started to cook in Vancouver and Canada, for that matter, boy voices it was difficult to find young actors that were young enough that were good actors. Now we have many, 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 because there's a lot of training out there. And so in some ways, the women were kind of needed to do that in order to cover that category. But then I realized also that it was a category that was quite in demand and that I had the range for it, and I enjoyed doing it. So it was a combination of making that realization, but also just that I had done well as I went along, and I just kept getting cast for it. So the other thing, too, I want to say is that there are so many different ranges of boy voices and so many styles of boy voice performance that a good part of it is your biology. So, I'm an alto as far as when it comes to singing measurements, I'm an alto. And so I can get that mid-range relatively easily. But the question is, do you want an authentic boy or do you want a character boy? For example, Chaozu was a bubble voice. It wasn't anywhere near a Spike or others like.
Yeah.
So Chaozu was more like this, and so he had a bubble voice, and it was kind of like this,
whereas, Spike is just like, hey, what's going on? Yeah, I'm still here, everybody. I'm not going anywhere. And so there are different placements. And then, but what I do when I get into a role, whether it's a cartoony or character or real for boy, is I really, and all the young actors out there or otherwise actors, any age actors, I really, really encourage you to get a sense of the setting that you're in the scene so that you can be physical in your performance. But also the description of whatever boy you're doing is extremely important. So one area I would like to do a little bit more of are some of the lazy boys or the chubbier boys or the ones in the background. And so if I were to do a little boy who's a little bit chubbier, then I would embody that, and that would sound like this. I was wondering if you guys are like after recess, maybe we could go like to the store, 'cause I don't like this cafeteria. It doesn't have any French fries. Are you gonna eat that? And so you can put weight on to the character, right, by embodying that. So there's all kinds of ways to go with it, but you do need to have that basic placement first, as far as biology is concerned, right? Because if I was a high-pitched character, like, if I picked for example, Andrea Lidman, or even any actor that has a higher range, Sunny Westbrook, for example, you might,
They have a voice where they talk like this normally, so they're kind of up there here. They're talking, right? So that's where they are. That's just their normal voice.
And so if they were to do a boy,
then they're going to have to make it, they're going to put something on it like that. So it's a little bit like that, and that's their boy voice.
Because they have no other biology, you see? But if I'm in a mid-range like I am, then I can play around with all kinds of ranges, and that's why I could get down to Adrian's as well, which was more down here, like Adrian Saddleman, right? He's kind of here. Lori, stop that. Whatever. So it's, there's a combination of biology, manipulation, a sense of setting, and really, really getting the physicality, embodying the character. And that goes for really any preparation, I think, for any character.
Amazing how you can just jump into those voices on demand like that.
Computer chip. No.
Also since World Trigger was probably one of your biggest recent roles. Do you have anything else to say about Yuma, the character, or your performance as him, or about that show in general?
I love that show. I love that show. That's one of the ones that just really wore on me in a good way. And I think, again, because it's really cleverly written. It's got a very dry little bit of sense of humor between myself and Brian Doe. There's that sort of like kickback, Yuma's kind of this alien kind of boy, and they never know what's going to come out of the guy's mouth. He's so unpredictable. At this half, they don't know whether he's joking. They don't know whether he's serious. I think there's comedy in there when he's, when they always talk about food and eating, it's really, but it's also very, very interesting. And so it had the gamut, right? The sort of the dimensions and the depth of the storyline, right? With the Secret Service and then really just humanizing, him and his friends, so you have their role as what they need to do to solve all the problems of the world. And then you just have the comedy between friends. And I just love that they made him a little bit complex. Yeah.
I've spoken to a few members of the cast, and I love how you all love that show so much. And yes. That's so, I love that it drives you like that. Yeah. It's really great to hear. Going back to just a couple of older roles, back, early 2000s, late 90s, you had two major roles during kind of the peak of Gundam dubbing in Vancouver. You were Dorothy Catalonia in Gundam Wing and Mirai Yashima in Mobile Suit Gundam. And I think you did a few more as well, but those are the two I think most would recognize most readily. Yeah. They're two very different characters, and I was just wondering if there was anything that stood out to you about these roles or how you approached them.
For sure. By the way, I also played Kika, Cats, and Let's, which I think was part of the same show with Mirai.
Yeah, in the original Mobile Suit. Yeah.
So I had to do all those little guys too.
Actually, I missed that. I didn't realize you were all the kids.
Kika, Cats, and Let's. Yes, I was.
Yeah.
Very, very, very different characters. Mirai was very, I'm not going to say standard in sort of just taking away from it at all, but it was a character that was a range I'd played before, was, had compassion, but was still a smart woman, a captain, in quotes, in her own rank. And, it was enjoyable to play. And I think, again, that show had interesting, storylines and sidelines. The, Dorothy Catalonia was a very, very interesting character to me. So, Gundam was another big one that just took off and, a lot of people just loved it. And I really enjoyed playing this character that was, pretty atypical. I mean, you did not know what she was thinking. You did not know how dangerous she was. And I had to really play a very, very reserved performance there, which was fun for me to do because I was in my earlier days, I was a real character actor. And for some reason, this happens to actors all the time where you tend to get a little slotted, when you can do so much more. And sometimes that's just a matter of time and there's just so many more actors out there. But, I was doing a lot more character-y stuff at the time. So it was kind of a treat to, play somebody kind of so contemplative and in some ways evil,
You were a little against type, with those roles. So it was a interesting opportunity for sure. Yeah. And actually I can't believe I missed that. I didn't realize you were the kids in Mobile Suit Gundam. Did they originally want one person to do all three of those voices?
I cannot recall, but what I always know is a standard thing. And, it depends on the client really and what they want and the budget. Mm-hmm. But there's always the budget where they would like to save money. And of course, I was a real character actor and I had multiple roles that I knew how to do. And so they would assign it to you if their budget was a certain budget. But then there's storyline and quality of performance, I know for sure Pony, for example, really, really wanted to make sure that they had the right fit for the characters, although we all did multiple voicing as well. But I've never seen a cast that size in my entire life. That was, it was a universe.
For My Little Pony?
Yes.
Yeah, and it spans beyond Vancouver as well. It goes, it's a Vancouver, LA production, which there's a lot more of those, that kind of thing now, especially over the last 15 years or so.
And Jesse, I mean, less so just actors doing multiple voices. I'm talking about the number of characters that the show had in it. Like, that was unprecedented. I've never seen anything like that before. But no, back to Dorothy, etc. It was also, I think, one of the first shows back in the day that was performed so, in quotes, real. It was very movie-like. And for animation, new actors come into animation, they always want to scream and yell and have too much energy. But this was a good example of a show where it can be animated, but the performance can be very movie-like. And so that's a client choice and a style.
In terms of your voiceover work, you've done like lots of ADR and prelay. What do you have a preference?
Well, yes, obviously, prelay does pay way more than anime does. Although, if you have a regular role in anime, of course, that can add up, certainly. But it's just a lot more laborious, and you are not working with other actors when you're doing anime. So I don't dislike it whatsoever. I love all the mediums. I love, video games and, live action, all kinds of things. So I will never say no to work, because I enjoy it all. It's very creative for me and, always a challenge. And so I'll never say no to it. But yeah, the prelay is, at least in the day when we could get into the studio together. It was wonderful to work with everyone. And that's not even necessarily a standard way of recording. I think in LA, a lot of the actors do record independently. So it's quite unique, I think, in Canada that we have usually worked together in a group. So yeah, everybody wants to work prelay because it pays more, but yeah, I love ADR just as much. It's just a lot more time. It's a bit more tedious, and you're working solo with the director.
Yeah. And, collaboration winds up being a big thing in the way, well, at least the way prelay is done, around here. And obviously for the last year, we've been living and working in a pandemic. I'm just curious to know, how have you been able to adjust to this? Because I know that, technically you can still do voiceover work, but that kind of element of collaboration and camaraderie is going to be missing a lot for a lot of things, because you can't do everything in person. And I'm just wondering, how does that change the work and your kind of engagement with it?
Well, I mean, certainly the engagement with it is obvious, and we really do miss working with each other. There's no question. We are an extended family, all the actors, and we just don't have that opportunity. But we do when we are working in groups, and there are occasions where there have been studios where they have blocked off a very, very big room into 4 literally airtight cells where you can see each other, but you're siphoned off from each other. That occurs, but it's also just a matter of coming in individually and recording your lines, because obviously they just don't want, you to be exposed or you to expose anything to the engineers or the studio. So, it's a sad time on that respect. And certainly, I mean, luckily I have continued to work during this time. I would say probably overall for all of us, there's been a lesser amount, but it depends what series you get. It's very random. So I am still working, and I'm still working enough that I'm content with that. But I just know that it's really taken a toll on a lot of people. It's taken a toll on studios, on directors who are having to work from home. And also just the studios are having a lot more trouble, I would say, because they're limited simply because of the square footage. So there are a lot of places that record music or record bands have more challenges. So it's been a rough time for a lot of people, but I just, as always, you'll see me saying this all over Twitter and Instagram, that I'm just grateful, for what we have. Yeah.
And also, Cathy, you're a fairly seasoned guest, as I've alluded to before, a fairly seasoned guest at various anime and My Little Pony conventions over the last many years. And I'm just curious to know, how has this influenced your work and career?
The conventions, the fan,
fan engagement.
Well, I mean, it's the most, for me, it's one of the most wonderful things, because I'm a very, as you know, personal person. And so to me, when I have an engagement with a fan at a convention, I will give them my full attention and time. And I remember the very last BronyCon we did, I waited 3 hours until the last person was done. I will go over my time because I respect the kind of time that it takes for fans to want to see us be there, etc. And My Little Pony was such a legend. It's a legend, a legendary show, and it healed so many people on so many levels that that will never be forgotten. And so the least I can do from my end of it is be there present when I'm with a fan. And I appreciate, and I just want to say to everybody, thank you so much for all of your support, for all of us actors, for the shows. I greatly appreciate it. And I'm also very, very happy to pass on in the talks I do, etc. Tips about voice acting, etc., etc. There's a lot of people out there that I know have major talent, and I highly encourage people to keep pursuing it. But I just want to thank all the fans, because without you, it would be empty. Mm-hmm. It would be empty. Yeah.
And I guess to finish off, do you have anything else you'd like to just share about working on My Little Pony: Friendship is Magic? Because that's been such a major part of your career for the last decade, of course.
Well, as I said, it is an experience I will never forget, and one that definitely impacted me. Everybody knows that, because I see it from a much bigger perspective, an actor just doing a show, and because we had so much interaction with the fans. We saw the Brony community come together. We saw grandparents and families come together and interact with the Bronies. We saw talent explode because of My Little Pony: Friendship is Magic. And so many people heal on so many levels that this show was more than a show to me, and it will remain so. And so I take that with me, and it's very special. And I think it needs to be what's the word? Bronzed forever. Memories. But yes, and yeah. And again, I just encourage people who are interested in voice acting to continue pursuing it, because we're not going anywhere. The industry's not going anywhere. This is a good time with COVID-19 to practice your wares. I've continued to do workshops and voice coaching. I do it online now, but I do it sporadically when I can, but yeah, I'm hesitant to say I'm opening the floodgates just yet, but I am doing private coaching for people. So Cathy Weseluck Voice Productions. But continue, all of you out there with all your talents, to stay safe, stay positive. As I say, we've got this, and Spike says we've got this, and Shampoo says, "Hiya, Ranma." She still wants Ranma. She still wants Ranma.
Ranma 1/2, it'll never end. Even it ends, but it never really ends, and that's part of what makes it great. All right, Cathy, thank you so much for coming on. Where can folks find you online, or find more information about you or your courses and instruction?
Right now, so Cathy Weseluck Voice Productions is a makeshift website. I'm going to eventually have one that's a proper website, but that's just for some of my training. So you can go there and have a peek. I pretty much do them by the hour or two. As far as where I'm on, as far as platforms are concerned, I'm on Twitter and Instagram. Yeah. And
where I'll include your addresses in the notes. Can you share what's your Twitter and Instagram?
Cathy _ Weseluck is Instagram, and Twitter is at Cathy Weseluck, I think. Isn't that funny how we just don't recall?
Yeah, it is at Cathy Weseluck.
Think about actually, Jesse. Yeah. So thank you so much for doing this, and thank you again to the fans for everything. We are still here. We're going strong. And we're not going to stop. We're going to keep the positive.
Cathy, thanks so much. It's been a pleasure. And thank you to you for tuning into Zonan Canada. You can reach me on Twitter at jbetteridge, or email zonancanada@gmail.com. The theme song is by Ultra Klystron and can be found on his album Packet Flood, and you can find that at ultraklystron.com. Please subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcast app of choice. See you again.